Okie doke, we're going to get started. My name is Tony Virelli, and today my talk will be about basics of lockpicking, or from noob to still a noob. You will not leave here and become a career criminal. If you do, please call me because you learned more from me than I learned from myself. And we're just going to go through the basics of what a lock is and why locks are pickable, the types of locks there are, and the types of attacks you can do with a lock. One question some people might have right now is, what does lock picking have to do with the tech meetup? By definition, a lock is a technology. A wheel is technically technology. We just take it for granted, but I guarantee you the first person who figured it out didn't take it for granted. So at TechKnow, we'll cover all kinds of technologies, so don't think it just has to do with electronics, circuitry, electricity, things like that. We get into all kinds of things. So lock picking will be one of our first electronics related. So, one thing I want to go back and point out here. It's very important. 99% of all the information I'm about to talk about was found from lock-lab.com. If you're not on YouTube, get on YouTube. Pretty much I've learned everything I know about lockpicking from a user named Bosnian Bill. He is pretty much the best lockpicker I've ever seen in my entire life. Not saying I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of videos. He's pretty amazing. Okay, so first part is I want to make sure you understand, don't think that all locks, that there's an unpickable lock. It's kind of like in physical security, it's the same as cybersecurity. There's no such thing as something that's unhackable. And here's a quote right here. It says, "You can get the best locksmith in the world to design the best lock he can. Is it pick-proof? No, it's not. It can be very hard to pick, but it is pickable. Because you can get, say, the next 10 best locksmiths and give them unlimited money and time, and they will figure out a way to pick it." And that's completely true. Just like someone who says this is unhackable, give someone enough time and resources, and they will find a way to hack it. So the first section we're going to cover is how a lock works in general. To understand how to pick a lock, you have to understand how a lock works. This is no different than how a hacker would do a security system. You need to know how the security system works to find the vulnerabilities, to exploit those vulnerabilities. You're doing the same thing when it comes time for picking locks. So a lock has three main components to it, which is going to be the body, otherwise known as the Bible, the core, also known as the plug, and the pins. And there's technically two different kinds of pins, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So when you look at a lock, here's an example of a lock. This would be the body or the Bible of the lock. And this holds all the components of a lock inside of it. Then we have this right here, which is called the core or the plug. And this part is what the key actually slides into. And this also has all the holes in it that align with the plug with the pins inside there. So those are the main parts. And then you have your pins. And like I said, there's two separate kinds of pins, or two different types of pins. And I'll get into those in a little bit here. And now I'm going to reassemble. Okay. So, and the pins are all of different varying lengths, and that is why your keys look like a saw blade, because this, what it does is it allows the keys to line up, or the pins to line up, so that at different heights, they need to hit this, what's called a shear line. And the shear line, once all the pins are at the same height, the two separations of the pins will line up, and you'll be able to turn it, which I'll kind of try to demonstrate with this hacked up key. When you put this in here, sort of, let me set it down and do it. There we go. It's hard to see from this distance, but you should be able to see the three humps inside there now from the top pins touching the key pins, which allows this to be turned now. Whereas if you were to put something in there that, of course. By the way, this was printed here at TechKnow. Doesn't mean that, that I didn't design the key poorly. Let's back out here. Okay. Try again. Anyways, the key gets the pins lined up, the shear pins, to the shear line, which allows it actually to turn. It's a puzzle piece. Okay. So when the key's inserted to the key, as I said, the pins align perfectly with the different depths cut in the key and align with the top of the core. This is called the shear line. And they only align once the key's in there. That's why you might think when you put other keys in, they go all the way in. That's fine. There's springs pressing down the top pins, which are known as driver pins. And there's pressure from these top springs pushing down, so your keys will go in, but they won't align the pins properly to the shear line, hence why you can't turn it, but other keys will fit into a keyway. And then directly above our key pins, like I said, is the driver pin, which pushes downwards, giving tension, which is why you feel that, you can feel the bumping instead of it just going in and out very easily. And then when the pins are not fully aligned, so the driver pins will push the key pins out of place, and this gets them so that the pins are not lined up with the shear line. So it's actually the pins themselves not aligning with the shear line that doesn't allow the lock to turn. Section 2, why are locks pickable? So this is going to get kind of crazy, and there's going to be a lot of text, and I'm going to paraphrase. So pretty much, as it says, in a perfect world, if everything was machined just to precision and all done by the same exact company, locks probably wouldn't be pickable. Or if they were, you'd have to be really, really lucky to get them to pick. This is an example of what most of your pins look like inside of your cores or your plugs. Every pin would have to be the same diameter, and it would have to fit in there with no room left to move. So there's something called tensioning and lockpicking, and this is a printed version of a tension wrench. And all that means is you put a tension wrench into the keyway, and you turn it, and it locks the pins. It binds them. It makes them so they won't move, so everything tightens up. And that's called tensioning. Well, in a perfect world, if every single one of these holes was the same exact diameter perfectly, and every single one of these pins was exactly the same diameter perfectly, when you were to bind a lock or put tension on it, they would all bind. Hence, you would not get one, which is what actually is the vulnerability that allows you to pick locks. Like it says here, opening a lock would require either a key or an incredible amount of luck. And honestly, even with a key, it would still be a very hard thing to do because it would have to go in just perfectly and line up just perfectly, and it actually would make a key and a lock harder for you to use personally. I changed the text a little bit. The text on the website said, fortunately for us. I changed it to unfortunately. Manufacturing and machining are not perfect. He's looking at this from a person who wants to lockpick for a living. He's a locksmith. Manufacturing is not, in manufacturing, it's not unusual to discover that multiple companies develop different parts of the lock. So one company might create your Bible, one might create your plug, and one might create your pins. And they all have specifications, but unless every company is doing all parts of the manufacturing and all parts of the machining, you cannot guarantee the precision that you're actually going to need. So in order to accommodate for this, they allow themselves a certain amount of tolerance. And these tolerances are horrible. So the final variable is the core, which we talked about earlier, also known as the plug. And the real problem we run into is the alignment of the holes for the pins. So at the top is what we wish we had, right? It's perfect alignment. If you turned one, they would all bind at the same time. But the two bottom ones are more likely what you're going to end up getting. Now these are horribly exaggerated. They would never look that bad. But at a precision level, if you looked at them, they would be either offset at that diagonal or back and forth like that. Any misalignment and proper spacing between the holes or hole size variations introduces all kinds of problems to the lock. Either the pins will flop around inside the lock, kind of like this, because this is not machined properly, and you got a loose lock. And they call those sloppy or flop. And the more flop a lock has, the easier it is to pick. And flop is the addition of the misalignment of the plug with the pins with the core. And again, it says right here that the precision of the entire lock is compromised. Lock pickers count on some level of imprecision, but it causes the pins to bind one at a time in a specific binding order. So again, we'll get back into binding. And what that means is when I put tension on a lock, depending on how these were machined, if these were misaligned, or the size of the pins inside, as I start to lock this, it stops me. I can't turn it past a certain point. The reason that is one of these pins is binding. It's locking against the shear line and saying, I can't move anymore. But the other two pins may not be bound. They might be floppy and loose inside there. And what this allows us to do is put tension on this. And depending on, like I said, the machining, it's going to depend on which of these picks ends up actually becoming the binding pick, or excuse me, the binding pin, which allows us to get in there and pick it later, which I'll get into the picking part of it. Right now I'm just kind of talking about why it's pickable. So the total slop is the combination of all the manufacturing errors and all the parts combined. Section 3, picking techniques. So I'm only going to cover 3, but one of the 3 is a very broad term. So there's raking, kinetic, sometimes called rocking or zipping, and those are 2 different types of kinetic attacks. There's lots of kinetic attacks. And then single pin picking, which is what you guys all see in a movie usually. It's actually probably the least used if possible. I was telling the story earlier, but I went to a convention out in Vegas one year, and they had an area called I can't remember, it's picking the lock forced. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But pretty much they had all kinds of locks laying around and whole picks for everyone to pick up and use. And I'm like, oh, I can't do this. This is too hard. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never picked a lock before in my life. The guy's like, here, just pick this up. And he hands me a master lock padlock. And he's like, just put this in this lock. It's called a tension wrench. He goes, put your finger on it just a little bit. Just give it a little bit of tension. So I did that. And he handed me a rake lock, which if you look at that first pick, it's got 3 swoops on it. And I'll get into the different pick types later. And he's like, I just want you to take this and just move it in and out like this. Just really slowly, nice, just barely any tension, any pressure on that thing. Just move it back and forth. So I'm doing this for about 5-10 seconds. I'm like, see, it's not working. He's like, this is really weird. He goes, I think you might have actually gotten it. He's like, just release the tension off the wrench a little bit. So I released my finger off the tension wrench just a little bit, and the padlock just popped open. And I'm like, I don't know what I did. He goes, exactly. You don't have to. And that was called raking. And getting into more detail, raking only works on locks with, well, let me rephrase this, works best with locks that don't have security pins, and I'll get into different types of pins later as well. But you could get lucky and get it with security pins as well. Kinetic, there's different, so again, raking is just putting a lock in, not a pick like this, putting a pick in and just moving it in and out like this, really slowly, while you have tension so that you're causing binding on the pins. Then there's one called rocking. Rocking, you want a little bit different kind of a pick, but that's where you put it in and just move it forward and backwards, doing exactly what it sounds like, rocking it. And the point of doing this is, again, when you have a bound, you're just hoping to rock the pins up enough, find the binders randomly, and get them up to the shear line. And over enough time and back and forth, you will find that. And then there's zipping, which is kind of like if you've ever heard of a bump key. Zipping does the same thing. You put tension on, you put this in there, and you quickly just pull it out as fast as you can. And you're hoping that enough kinetic energy zips across and pops the pin up to the shear line, and you do it over and over and over again until you pop all of them into the shear line and it opens. And then single pin picking is exactly what it sounds like. You're going through one by one, pushing each pin up individually, trying to find the shear line one by one until it pops open. Definitely that is the most difficult of all 3 to do. So section 4 is the type of lock picks. So I'm going to kind of explain what these are, and then the best case uses for them. So the very first pick in the top left, this is called a hook, which is an example of this. Now the picture I picked, it's called a postal hook. It's a very massive exaggeration. This would probably be considered a postal hook. Postal mailboxes have really deep set pins, so you need these things called postal hooks to get up inside of them. You would never use that for your standard pick, most likely. But I just did that to give you an example so you can see the drastic up on the screen. But that's a tool you'd most likely use for single pick picking, but can also be used for zipping. The next one is called a diamond. It's exactly what it sounds like. It pretty much looks like a pick with a diamond tip at the end of it like this. And again, that diamond can be used to push the pins up or for zipping is another thing you'd use it for. The next 2 are called balls. One is a single ball and one's a double ball. And they also have one that looks like the single ball and the double ball, but it's only on half the side. And those are half balls. These are used for dimple locks. And these are the locks that actually have full ball bearings inside them. They're a lot more complicated, and I'm not going to get into those here. I'm showing you this because if you were to go out and buy a lock pick set, these are most likely the picks you're going to find inside them. The very bottom left one is known as a lot of different things. I found this out that a lot of different locksmiths call their picks whatever they want. The technical term I believe for this is called a C rake, but a lot of people call it a snake rake because it looks like a little snake. or a worm rake is another term for it. This is good for rocking, and also it could be used for raking. The next one next to it is called either an actual S-rake, or sometimes it's called a double peak. And it's used in the same concept that it's used for raking or zipping, could be used for both. And the last one is called a triple peak, otherwise known as a bogota, is another term I hear all the time used for it. And this is what you use for raking. This is the pick I used when I picked open the padlock the guy gave to me. And the last one is called a city rake or an L rake. It's called city because it looks like a city landscape, skyscraper. And this is mostly used for rocking the picks back and forth. And I don't have any pictures of this here on my slideshow because I wasn't going to get this much into it. But to describe the difference of what a normal pin versus a serrated pin, there's a lot of different pins out there, but your main pins are going to be a normal pin, which I'll just kind of give you drawings here you can see. And this is a normal pin. It's just smooth on all the sides. It might be slightly rounded at the bottom, top, or flat. This is the normal pin. Then you have what's called a serrated pin, and this is where we start getting into security pins. And these serrations can be many or few, and I'm obviously exaggerating these. So this would be a serrated pin. And what this does is it has little gaps cut into it, so as you click first the pass part, this first serration might get caught in the shear line. So a picker who's inexperienced would think, oh, I got it. I felt a click. So they move on and don't think about it, but really they didn't get it. It was just to trick the person. And it causes, you might have to get two. There might be one serration, two serrations, three serrations. I saw one where this middle part was loose around the normal pin, and it slid up and down. So it was a crazy. So there's another thing like this. It looks exactly the same, except there's no sides. So it's just the top, a gap in, top, and this is called a T-pin. It does the same thing. And then the last one that I'm going to get into today is called a spool pin. And it kind of narrows like a funnel. And again, this causes floppiness, or like I talked about the slop in the lock, but it's fake slop because it actually is machine precision at this weight, but when you press it up, you're like, oh, it's moving. It must not be bound, but it might actually already be bound. You might already be done. You might overpick it. And that's what happens. Sometimes you can overpick it and you get all of them above and past the shear line, so you think you still have to pick one, but one got too far past, so it's unpickable at this point. So I'm going to demonstrate, or attempt to demonstrate, picking this lock, which is 3D printed, using those techniques. It'll be a single pin picking technique, and these are all standard pins. So what someone would do, and there's two ways you can do this. There's only one way I can do it with this one. There are different tension wrenches as well. Normally, you see most of them where they do it's the bottom of the keyway. They put it down here, and they apply their tension. There are some specific ones where the tool actually goes in like this, vertically, and this piece goes in like this, but imagine that it's coming upwards for top of the keyway. Now I'm going to do this top of the keyway because it's the only way I found that'll actually work with this. So you put it in the top of the keyway, and I'm going to apply a little bit of tension, and I'm going to use a hook pick to go inside here. And pretty much what I'm doing is I have a little bit, and I can feel this first one, if you listen, is flopping around inside there. If I come up to the second pin, I feel for it, it's not moving. And the third pin is flopping around, which means that the second pin in there is bound up. It can't move, which means that's the first one I want to pop up to the shear line because it's stopping me from turning the core anymore inside the Bible. So if I come over here and I try to press this second pin up, now, you can't see this here, but if you can see here, it's met the shear line. Now, as I apply tension, if I come back in here, I hit the third pin, it's not moving, it's locked up. But if I apply a little pressure, I've now hit the shear line and now that one's picked. So that means the last one I have to do is come in here at the first one, and I have to get off to the edge here. And now, it picks, it just picks, that's how it works. So until I go all the way around, and those pins fall back into place, and it locks itself back up again. So that's the basics of picking. Again, if this was a rake situation, I would have just took this thing and gone like this with tension on it, and it would have hit it all until it popped. Rocking, you can put it in and go like this, and it might actually work on this, I don't know. It would after a while because I'm cheating. I just realized I was holding the first pin up with my finger. And then the zipping is the same thing. You would just go, and it won't work here because the pins will all pop out the top if I try to do that fast enough. So I'm going to tell you the next steps that you need to take after this is you need to go to lock-lab.com. This is the website of Bosnian Bill. You don't have to find his YouTube channel. Everything you need to know is on here. He has 1,000 reviews on all the lock pick sets out there, how to get started, what locks to get started with. So number one, go to his website. Number two, follow him or subscribe to him on YouTube. So he does like at least one video a day. This guy is pumping them out. 3, this is straight out of Bosnian Bill's mouth, and I can concur because I did this before I ever saw his videos. Do not buy your first lock pick set on Amazon.com. You're going to be very tempted to buy that $10 kit that's primable that comes with a clear practice lock. They're crap, they'll break, they'll bend, and they probably won't even pick the locks because precision on the picks are important once you get inside these pathways of these keys. You can buy a legitimately good set of picks for 30 bucks to 60 bucks. Sparrow makes a great set. It's one I want to get. It's about $150, which is up there, but it comes with every pick you're going to need and 3 different locks to practice with, like doorway locks. One that comes with standard pins, so you can practice on standard pins. One that comes with serrated pins, so you can practice on serrated pins. And the other one has I don't know why I'm losing my head now. You guys remember what I called that? No, not funnel. I can't remember off the top of my head. Spool pin, thank you. Completely lost my head. Anyways, spool pins, but then the top, they're all hex wrenchable, so you can take the hex wrench, unscrew them all, pop all the pins out, and repin them yourself. So you can make your own combination to try to learn new and more difficult locks. Like I said, it's $125, $150. They are a UK-based business, so you're going to have to pay the shipping on that. But the good news is, ever since the Brexit, the UK pound has dropped, so everything's technically cheaper in US dollars. Number 4, practice on your own locks or buy locks from a store to practice with. And that kind of coincides with number 5, don't be dumb. Don't pick a door of your friends, speaking to children in the room. If you are underage and your friend's like, hey, come on over, pick my parents' lock, see if you can do it, technically, if you didn't get the permission of the parents, that's not okay. Not only that, if you don't know what you're doing and you haven't been practicing, you can actually damage the lock, which is actually worse than a parent yelling at you for trying to break into their house. And I'm going to leave you on the same exit slogan that Bosnian Bill says at the end of every single one of his videos, which is stay safe and stay legal. So that's all I got. I'm open for questions.
So is there so if I don't want to pick locks, I just want to be safe, what's the best kind of lock I could buy?
Not master. Master lock seems to be by far, it's a joke. Bosnian Bill literally has a joke. He calls them disaster locks. They're just, sometimes he just sticks a screwdriver and it pops open. Definitely Yale seems to be a really good brand. If you want the most secure possible lock you could ever get, you go to a locksmith and say, make me an unpickable lock, and he'll make a lock that he can't pick, or it will be difficult picking. And that'll keep your average criminal out. It's going to stop the guy with the snap gun trying to open your door, the guy with a rake trying to rake your door. A lot of security pins. And one thing I didn't even get into is that sometimes those serrated pins we talked about, not only do they serrate the pins, but then inside both the plug and the Bible, they'll also counter drill serrations into these holes. So as you're clicking up, each one of those serrations clicks multiple times. So someone who doesn't know what they're doing would never get past it. Personally, I would never be able to pick a serrated lock. Wouldn't be good enough to do that. I'm a big raker. So yeah, the most secure locks you can get, obviously, would be ones that you can get that are going to be set by a locksmith, or in today's age, if you will, they actually have ones that don't have keyways anymore. So it's not pickable technically. At that point, you have to worry about other things like software vulnerabilities where a lock could be hacked. I know, was it Lock, L-O-K? Or someone made a door lock that was completely wireless via app. It hooked to your Wi-Fi network. But the problem with it was you could pop it off the door and reassign it. You can make an ad hoc network on your phone and unlock it. They didn't think about that apparently. So, any other questions?
How long did it take you to print that?
So the Bible itself was printed on fastest quality, and I want to say this took somewhere between 24 and 48 hours, if I remember correctly. I don't remember off the top of my head. I printed this a long time ago, like 3 months ago, 2 months ago. The base took like less than an hour, and this was printed on fast as well. The pick took about an hour, and that was on fast. The pins and the tension wrench printed together, and that was somewhere around an hour, 2 hours. The key took about 2 hours, I believe. That was not including the time it took me to figure out to make the key. But this baby right here, we printed it the first time on fast, and I wish we would have kept it, but we destroyed it, I think. Oh, no, we kept it. We're going to destroy it for camera. This was the first one I printed. And at first sight, you're going to look at it and go, okay, for some reason it looks lighter. But I'm going to squeeze this one for you. Okay, I'm going to squeeze this one for you. Okay, this thing is just over here. It's just brittle. The supports on the inside, the honeycomb pattern it made, just destroyed. And every time I took a lock pick in here to do it, it started pulling on the plastic and snapping it off the front. So we realized I wasn't going to be able to demo this, and I knew this was going to be sitting here for a while, and I knew people were going to play with it. So I said, screw it, I'm going to print this again. I printed on high quality, and if I drop this, big difference. This thing is super solid, and I want to say 96 hours is how long this one took on high. Now, there's a lot, you can come up and look at this afterwards. There's a lot of intricacy to this. It's not like little details, but you have to realize it prints the cylinder with a slot the whole way through, and then sunk into that slot are these 3 holes. So when you look at it from this angle, it doesn't look a lot, but if you turn it sideways, you see the slot with these cutouts. And it printed just like this. So I had to print, and I was lucky not to get a lot of sagging in this area here. It just took a little bit of sanding. But yeah, this took longer than all the other parts combined. I think if I would have printed the whole thing on high, we would have talked well over a week of printing to get it all done. So added together.
Did you find that on Thingiverse?
Yes, this was off Thingiverse. And if Mr. Thingiverse guy, whoever developed this, is watching this video by some random chance, please print a key for it. Reverse engineering a key is not as easy as it sounds. So this is like my 20th print of this key to get it just right. 1 millimeter on a key is a lot.
What was that brand of kit you're talking about?
So the one I want, there's 3 kits I want that Bogdan and Bill has always given the top ranks to. One is by a guy named Mad Bob, who hand makes every pick, hand files every pick, and it's only like 30 or 40 bucks, but it's only like 4 or 5 picks, but it's the only 4 or 5 picks you need. It's a hook pick, a rake pick, I think like an the snake pick, and an L rake. And then it comes with like 4 or 5 tension wrenches, regular wrenches, top of the keyway wrenches. So that's Mad Bob. And then Sparrow is the other manufacturer. And Sparrow makes 2 really good sets. One is called Sparrow Night School, I think is what it's called. And that comes in a pouch about yay big. And it's got, I think, an 8-pick set with a whole bunch of different tension wrenches in it. But it also has those 3 locks in it that you can practice on yourself. And then they also have another one. And I can't remember if it's called the Sparrow Ninja set or the Sparrow Night View. It's a little pack, it's about this big, fits in your pocket. It's got the main picks you want. And the big thing about it is it's got a piece of board that goes behind it that glows in the dark, so when you're trying to use it at night, you can see the outlines of the picks to know what you want.
Is it legal to own picks?
In the state of Iowa, you are completely okay to carry around locks in your own pocket, according to the internet, not me. I am not witness in your case. It is the burden of the state to prove that you had ill intent to use the locks. If you go online, there's a whole website dedicated to each state. It outlines them in color. Pretty much there's no law on the books for Iowa, hence there's nothing against it. Like Tennessee, I believe it was Tennessee or Kentucky. If you have them, they immediately suspect you have ill intent, and you can be arrested just for having them in your hands. So, yes. Now, if you walk, I don't know what the rule is about walking around like with like car Slim Jims. That might be I'm not kidding, that might be a completely different law. That's not a lock pick, if you will. But cars, there's a lot of car lock picks out there. Like they literally, like here's a BMW pick, here's a Lexus pick, here's a Ford pick. It's kind of crazy, so.
All right, thanks, Tony.
Yes.